All right, UPSC warriors, let's dive in. Especially if you've got international relations on your plate. You know you can't escape one name, Machiavelli. We've all heard the name, sure, but do we really get what this guy was all about?
He's one of those figures who gets boiled down to a soundbite, you know? But there's so much more to him, and honestly, his work is surprisingly relevant to what you're all studying right now for the IR optional.
So, no utopian dreamer, our Machiavelli. This was a guy dealing with the real world, power. How do you grab it, hold on to it, and most importantly, how do you make it work? For the state, that is. And he was very clear. A strong state is key why for its people to flourish.
Right, not just some abstract idea of the state. And what I find fascinating is how upfront Machiavelli was about the not-so-pretty side of power, how it actually works, not how we wish it did. That famous line, for example, where he says a ruler must learn how not to be virtuous. It's a bit jarring, no?
Well, it definitely raises eyebrows. But that's where we got to remember. Context is everything. We're talking 16th century Italy. Backstabbing was practically a national sport back then, all those rival city-states.
Exactly.
So did Machiavelli think all rulers should just be evil masterminds?
Not at all.
Okay, good. Because that was getting a bit dark.
But he did point to leaders who, shall we say, bent the rules, broke promises when they had to, played the game strategically, and their states, they thrived.
So it's more about acknowledging the reality of power, not some moralistic fairy tale.
It's about what Machiavelli called raison d'etat, the reason of the state.
Raison d'etat.
Basically, he argued a state has to operate by a different standard than individuals.
Okay, hold on. I can see some of our listeners getting ready to argue with that one.
Oh, absolutely.
But let's hear him out.
His point was the state's survival, the well-being of its citizens. Sometimes those goals require tough choices. Choices that might look morally questionable from an individual's perspective.
Sounds like some of the core dilemmas you guys are wrestling with in IR, right?
Oh, absolutely. This is straight from the syllabus, in a way.
So Machiavelli, not exactly Mr. Rogers, but maybe not the devil incarnate either.
Right. It's easy to get caught in that trap.
So tell me, what did Machiavelli actually believe about individual morality then?
That's where it gets interesting. He absolutely thought individuals should be morally upright in their personal lives.
Oh, okay, so there's a distinct...
Huge E one. But when it came to the state, he saw a different set of rules at play.
A different game board altogether, almost.
Exactly. Leaders facing tough choices, morally gray areas, not something to celebrate, but sometimes unavoidable.
Like those classic IR scenarios, national security versus individual rights, that kind of thing.
You got it. These are precisely the situations Machiavelli was grappling with centuries ago.
So his work is like a historical lens, helps us understand these complexities of power.
A framework for analyzing those tough calls, absolutely.
So for our listeners, where do you stand on this Machiavelli guy? Cynical genius, cold-hearted realist, or something in between?
Well, we've got some scholarly heavyweights who weighed in on that. Leo Strauss, for example, called Machiavelli a straight-up teacher of evil.
Whoa, okay, strong words.
Then you've got folks like J.H. Sabine. He labeled Machiavelli amoral.
Meaning?
Basically, he argued Machiavelli was just describing the world as it is.
Not necessarily saying this is how it should be.
Right, just laying out the facts, no sugarcoating.
But I have a feeling it's not quite that simple, right?
You're catching on. That's why we're still debating this guy centuries later. And Machiavelli himself didn't make it easy on us. He said a prince, a leader, must be both good and willing to do bad when necessary.
Okay, now that's a statement to unpack.
That's what makes him so challenging and so important. It's on US to figure out what that means for leadership, for statecraft, for the world we're trying to build.
Big questions, no easy answers. Sounds like a good place to leave it for today, though. Let our listeners ponder that one for a bit.
Let those wheels turn.
We'll be back soon to dig even deeper into Machiavelli's world. And trust me, there's plenty more to uncover.
Oh yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Until then, keep those IR books open and those minds sharp.
And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss part 2. You know, this is exactly why Machiavelli is essential reading if you're even considering a career in international relations. He really forces you to confront some uncomfortable truths, to really question those assumptions about how power actually works in the world.
Yeah, he's like, all right, you want to play in the big leagues? Let's talk about how decisions actually get made, how states really interact with each other. No sugarcoating.
Exactly. And here's something that might surprise you. Machiavelli was writing before the Reformation.
Before.
Yep, way before. But he was already arguing that we need to separate religion from politics.
Now, that was a radical idea back then. For those of us who might need a quick history lesson, what exactly was the Reformation all about?
Think of it this way. The Catholic Church, total powerhouse, right?
Yeah.
Politically, spiritually, the whole 9 yards. Then along comes this guy, Martin Luther. Nails his 95 Theses to the church door, and boom, everything changes.
Like a full-on revolution.
Exactly. The Reformation basically challenged the church's authority, said individuals could have a direct relationship with God, didn't need the church as the middleman.
Talk about a power shift. So Machiavelli was already on that wavelength, even before it was a thing.
He saw how religion could be used to control people, to justify whatever the rulers wanted to do. And he argued that real authority should come from practical ability, from the consent of the people being governed, not just from divine right.
Sound familiar?
This idea, the separation of church and state, cornerstone of modern international relations, right?
Totally. But you're saying it wasn't always the norm.
Nope. Machiavelli was ahead of his time on that one.
Okay, this is blowing my mind a bit. So he wasn't just talking about power in some vague theoretical sense. He was actually laying the groundwork for a whole new way of thinking about politics, about the state, about international relations as we know it.
It's all connected, and there's another fascinating link we could make. Fast forward a bit. Think about the rise of capitalism.
Capitalism. Now, how does that fit in?
Bear with me. It'll make sense. So capitalism takes off. And with it, you get this idea of the Protestant work ethic.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Guys like Max Weber really explored this. The idea is hard work, worldly success. Those become signs of God's favor.
So not just about religious devotion anymore.
It's about what you achieve in the world, a real shift in focus.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this. Machiavelli, while not specifically talking about economics, was all about practical results, not rigid dogma.
Bingo. It's that emphasis on pragmatism, on getting things done that connects them.
Interesting. So even though Machiavelli wasn't thinking about capitalism specifically...
Yeah, he couldn't have predicted it, but there's this underlying alignment in their thinking.
This is why I love these deep dives. You always find these unexpected connections.
And it reminds us that ideas have this ripple effect. They influence things in ways we might not even realize.
So for all our listeners out there, deep in their UPSC prep, especially those tackling international relations, Machiavelli isn't just some names you need to memorize for the exam.
He's giving you a toolkit.
Exactly. A way to understand the world, to analyze the decisions states make, the motivations of leaders, those forces that are shaping the global landscape.
He's asking those tough questions that every diplomat, every policymaker, even every engaged citizen needs to wrestle with.
Like what?
How much does morality really matter in international relations? Can we balance the interests of the state with individual rights? And where do we draw the line between being pragmatic and being ethical?
Almost like having Machiavelli in your back pocket during those UPSC exams. You can pull out his ideas in your essays, your interviews, really get into those nitty-gritty IR issues they love to throw your way.
Exactly. It shows you're not just memorizing facts and figures, you're thinking critically, engaging with the material.
And let's be clear, studying Machiavelli doesn't mean you're suddenly endorsing all this ruthless behavior.
No, not at all.
It's about understanding the complexities of power, those dilemmas leaders face.
Being able to analyze a situation from multiple perspectives.
We've covered a lot of ground today. Machiavelli's realism, his views on morality, those surprising connections to the Reformation, even capitalism.
Right, it's all intertwined.
But it all boils down to this. How do we navigate this messy world of international relations?
And that's where Machiavelli's true value lies. He doesn't give us easy answers, pre-packaged solutions.
More like a guide to asking the right questions.
Exactly. He makes us confront those tough choices.
So here's a final thought experiment for you, our listeners. Imagine Machiavelli was alive today, dropped right into this world of ours. Climate change, global terrorism, economic uncertainty.
Wow, yeah, that's a good one.
What would he make of it all?
How would he advise leaders to act? Would he see those same power dynamics playing out on the world stage, just in new forms?
And maybe even more importantly, how would you apply his insights as future diplomats, as people who want to make a difference?
Where do you draw that line between pragmatism and doing what's right?
These are the big questions, the ones that keep us up at night.
And honestly, that's what makes IR so fascinating, so challenging.
And so crucial to get right.
Machiavelli gives us a framework, helps us analyze the world with clearer eyes, a more critical perspective.
And that, my friends, is the power of a good deep dive.
Yeah.
We've gone beyond the surface, explored those hidden connections.
And hopefully sparked some serious thinking along the way.
Especially for those of you on that UPSC journey.
Remember, understanding these concepts, these thinkers, that's what sets you apart.
It's what allows you to analyze, critique, and ultimately form your own informed opinions.
So if you found this deep dive helpful, hit that subscribe button, share it with your fellow UPSC warriors.
Keep those study groups buzzing. We'll be back soon with more deep dives, more insights, more tools to help you conquer that exam, and maybe even the world.
Until then, keep learning, keep questioning.
And most importantly, keep striving for a better world.